swore I would never set foot in that house again. The night my parents told me to leave, my mother didn't even look up from her crossword puzzle. My father just pointed at the door. I was 18 years old. That was 7 years ago. That spring, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Growing up in Naperville, Illinois, in the kind of neighborhood where every lawn looks identical and every family has the same unspoken rule book, I always felt slightly out of place. Not visibly. I was good at performing normal. I got decent grades, I helped set the table, I said the right things at the right times. But underneath all of that, I knew I didn't fit the mold my parents had been quietly constructing for me since before I could talk. My father is an engineer, has been his entire adult life, same firm for 26 years. My mother taught middle school science until I was 12, then stopped working to focus on the family, which mostly meant she had more time to plan my future. They weren't cruel people, not in the obvious sense. They never screamed, they never hit. What they did was quieter than that, and in some ways harder to explain to people who haven't lived it. They had a plan. My older brother followed it. He went to the University of Illinois for pre-med. Now, he's finishing his residency in cardiology. Every holiday, my mother finds a way to mention it at least 3 times. My father nods like he built the hospital himself. I was supposed to be the second act of that story. The problem was that I was 17 when I figured out, with absolute certainty, what I actually wanted to do with my life, and it had nothing to do with medicine, or engineering, or anything that came with a guaranteed salary and a retirement plan. I wanted to run a restaurant, not manage one, not work in one as a stepping stone to something else. I wanted to own a restaurant, design the menu from scratch, build the atmosphere, create something that felt alive. I had been cooking since I was 9 years old, sneaking into the kitchen after school to try recipes I found online. By high school, I was making elaborate Sunday dinners while my parents watched football. My mother always ate every bite and never once connected that to a possible future for me. When I was a junior, I found a culinary management program at Johnson & Wales University in Providence. It combined business with culinary arts, had a real placement track, and wasn't cheap, but I had been saving money from babysitting and part-time work at a local grocery store since I was 14. I had just over $3,000 in my own account. I applied without telling them. I got in. I waited 2 weeks before saying anything. I practiced how I would explain it. I thought about their questions in advance and prepared answers. I genuinely believed that if I was calm and clear and had all the facts ready, they would hear me out. I was wrong about that. It was a Tuesday evening in March. My mother had made pot roast. My father was reading something on his tablet. I waited until we had all finished eating. Then I said I had something I wanted to share. My mother put down her fork. I told them about Johnson & Wales. I told them I had already applied and been accepted. I told them about the program, the career track, what the culinary industry actually looked like from a business perspective. I had printed out the acceptance letter and I slid it across the table. My father looked at it for maybe 4 seconds. "Absolutely not," he said. I asked him to please just look at the program details. I had a folder. My mother held up one hand like she was stopping traffic. "We didn't raise you to flip burgers," she said. I remember the specific feeling of that sentence landing. Not anger, not yet, just a kind of hollow thud. Like something had confirmed what I'd always suspected but hoped wasn't true. I told her this wasn't about flipping burgers. I told her I had researched this thoroughly, that culinary management graduates ran hospitality groups and managed multi-location businesses and some owned their own places by 30. I told her I was passionate about this in a way I had never felt about anything else. My father said, "You're 18 years old, you don't know what you're passionate about." "You're going to apply to U of I," my mother said. "Pre-business or pre-med, we'll discuss which one." "I'm not doing that," I said. The conversation deteriorated from there. My father raised his voice, which he almost never did. My mother went cold and clipped in that particular way she had when she was truly done with something. My brother, home from his first year of college for spring break, stayed in his room with the door closed the entire time. By the end of the night, my father said in a voice that was almost conversational, "If you pursue this ridiculous path, you can pursue it somewhere else." I looked at him. "You mean you're kicking me out?" "I mean this house supports people who make responsible choices." My mother added quietly, "You'll come around. Give it a few months. You'll realize what you're throwing away and you'll come back with a clearer head." She almost sounded sorry when she said it. Almost. I went upstairs, packed one large duffel bag in a backpack, and by 10 o'clock that night, I was sitting in the parking lot of the Walgreens 3 blocks away texting my best friend Audrey asking if I could sleep on her couch. Audrey said yes without asking a single question. That is still one of the kindest things anyone has ever done for me. The first month was the most disorienting of my life. I finished out my senior year living with Audrey and her mother, a woman named Sandra who worked nights at the hospital, and asked only that I keep the kitchen clean and the noise down after 10. I did both. I also cooked dinner 3 or 4 nights a week because it was the only way I knew how to say thank you. My parents did not call. My brother texted me once, 4 days after I left, to ask if I was okay. I said yes. He said okay. That was the end of it. I graduated in May. My parents were not there. Audrey's mom came and took photos. That summer, I worked double shifts at a restaurant downtown, not as a chef, just as a server, because that's what was available, and I needed income. I was saving every dollar I could. Johnson & Wales had a modest financial aid package for me, but I had tuition, housing, and living expenses to figure out on a timeline that didn't care about my circumstances. I moved to Providence in August with $4,200 saved, a partial scholarship, a subsidized loan I'd applied for myself, and a level of anxiety I had learned to function through like background noise. The first year was genuinely brutal. I worked 20 hours a week at a cafe near campus, took a full course load, and shared a 2-bedroom apartment with 2 other students where the heat sometimes stopped working and we all owned multiple sets of wool socks. I ate a lot of rice and beans and eggs. I called Audrey every Sunday. I did not call my parents. What I did do every single day was show up, to class, to work, to every opportunity the program put in front of me. By the end of my second year, I had a part-time position assisting a local catering company that did corporate events. By my third year, I was helping manage their weekend bookings. My operations professor, a former restaurant group executive named Dr. Kellner, told me I had unusually strong instincts for the business side and asked if I wanted to do an independent study with her. I said yes immediately. That independent study turned into a real mentorship. Dr. Keller introduced me to people. She brought me to industry events. She wrote recommendation letters that opened doors I didn't even know existed. When I graduated, she connected me with a small but well-regarded hospitality group in Chicago that was looking for an operations coordinator. I moved back to Illinois, not to Naperville, and started the job. I was 22. The next 5 years were the ones I had been building toward without fully knowing it. I was good at the work. Not in a flashy way, in a methodical, show-up-and-solve-it way. Within 2 years, I was managing operations for 2 of the group's 4 locations. I understood food costs and labor scheduling and vendor relationships and what it actually took to keep a restaurant financially viable. I also started putting together a business plan, slowly, on the side for something of my own. I dated someone for about 2 years during that stretch, a man I'll call Connor, because that's his name and he deserves to be named. Connor was thoughtful and funny and genuinely supportive of my ambitions, and I thought for a while that we were heading somewhere serious. But about 18 months in, he started suggesting, in gentle ways at first, and less gentle ways later, that maybe I should reconnect with my family. "You've clearly built something," he said once. "Don't you think it's time to let them see that?" I told him I didn't feel ready. "Ready for what, though?" he said. "Forgiveness? You don't have to forgive them to just have a relationship." I remember staring at him and thinking, you have never been asked to leave your own home with a duffel bag at 10 o'clock at night by the 2 people who are supposed to be your unconditional safety net. You don't know what you're asking me to set aside. I didn't say that. I said I needed more time. He kept returning to the subject. It became a pattern. He would bring them up. I would withdraw. He would push a little. I would go quieter. The last time it came up in a serious way, he said, almost gently, "I just think you'd be happier if you dealt with this." I said, "I think I need you to trust that I know what I can handle." We broke up 3 weeks later. It wasn't entirely about my parents, but it wasn't entirely not about them either. I think Connor wanted a version of me that had already resolved something I hadn't resolved yet. He wanted the finished product, and I was still in the middle of the process. It hurt more than I expected, but it also clarified something for me. I was done letting other people decide what my healing was supposed to look like or how fast it was supposed to happen. I was 25. I was running 2 restaurant locations, and I had a business plan I was getting close to pitching to investors. Audrey was still my closest friend through all of this. She had moved to the city 2 years after me, was working in UX design, and we had a standing Thursday dinner that we protected like it was a religious obligation. She was the person who knew everything. Every version of the story, every complication, every moment I had second-guessed myself. Her mom, Sandra, had become something like a second mother to me in the years since high school. She'd retired from nursing and moved to a smaller place in Evanston, and I drove out to see her at least once a month. She asked real questions and listened to the real answers. She celebrated every milestone with me, including the first time I had a formal meeting with a potential investor. She sent a card that said simply, "This is what you were meant to do." I still have it. I also had 2 colleagues from my first job who had become genuinely close friends, a woman named Isabel who was now a pastry chef, and a man named Devin who had left the industry to go into real estate but still ate at every restaurant I was associated with out of something he called loyalty and appetite. These people were my real family in every way that counted. They showed up, they stayed. My actual family stayed quiet for 7 years. The call came on a Wednesday in April. I was at one of the locations doing a walkthrough before dinner service when my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number at first, and then I realized it had an 847 area code Naperville, and something in my chest went still. I didn't answer. It rang again an hour later. Then a third time the following morning. Then my brother called from his number, which I still had in my phone, and I stared at it for a long moment before picking up. "Hey," he said. He sounded uncomfortable. "I know this is out of nowhere." "It's been 7 years," I said. "I know." A pause. "Mom and Dad want to talk to you." I asked him what had changed. He told me. My father had been laid off 8 months ago when his firm merged with another company and reorganized his entire department. He had found some contract work but nothing stable. My mother's car had needed a major repair. They'd had a significant medical expense, and they had burned through most of their savings. They were behind on the mortgage. I sat with that information for a moment. "And they want to talk to me because," I said. "Because you've done well," my brother said, "and because you're family." I noticed he didn't say they were sorry. I noticed he didn't use the word sorry at all. I told him I would think about it and I would be in touch. I ended the call and sat in my car in the restaurant parking lot for 20 minutes, not thinking about anything in particular, just letting the information settle. I called Dr. Kellner that weekend. She had become, over the years, something of a mentor/sounding board for decisions that were bigger than restaurant operations. I explained the situation. She listened without interrupting, which was one of her best qualities. When I finished, she said, "What do you want to do?" I said I didn't know. She said, "Yes, you do. What do you actually want?" I thought about it honestly, and the answer I arrived at was complicated, which I told her. I didn't want to rescue them. I didn't want to perform forgiveness. I didn't fully feel. I also didn't want to carry the specific weight of knowing they were in serious trouble and doing nothing. Not because I owed them, but because of who I wanted to be. I had built my life on certain values, and one of them was that I didn't let people drown if I could prevent it, even people who had not been kind to me. But I had conditions, real ones. Dr. Kellner said, "Then you already know what you're going to do." She was right. I agreed to a meeting, but on my terms, not in Naperville, not in the house I had left with a duffel bag at 18. I chose a coffee shop in the city where I was comfortable and familiar, and I told my brother to pass along the time and place. I also told him I would be bringing a written document to the meeting and I expected both of them to read it before agreeing to anything. The document wasn't a legal contract, though I had a lawyer I trusted review it anyway. It outlined, clearly and without drama, what limited financial help I was willing to offer. A one-time payment toward their mortgage arrears, no strings, no loan. And what I expected in return, which was not money. What I asked for was acknowledgement. Specific, explicit acknowledgement that what they had done when I was 18 had caused real harm, and a commitment to specific, changed behaviors if we were going to have any kind of ongoing contact. Attendance at milestone events I chose to invite them to. No commentary on my career, my life choices, or my relationship status, and no expectation of a return to the relationship we'd never actually had. I wrote that document in one sitting and I cried twice while writing it. Not sad tears, exactly. More like the kind of crying that happens when you've been carrying something for a very long time and you finally set it down. They were already at the coffee shop when I arrived. My mother looked older. My father looked smaller, somehow. Which I hadn't expected. He had always taken up a lot of space in my memory. I sat down. I ordered a coffee. I put the document on the table and told them to take a few minutes to read it. My mother started to say something before she had finished the first page. My father put his hand on her arm, which surprised me, and she stopped. They read the whole thing. My father looked up first. He looked like he was going to say several different things before he settled on what actually came out of his mouth. "We weren't perfect," he said. "No," I agreed. My mother said, "We thought we were doing what was right for you." I said, "I know you believe that. I'm not here to debate whether you meant well. What I know is what happened and what it cost me, and that's what this document reflects." A long silence. "You've clearly built something extraordinary," my mother said, and her voice broke a little on the last word. I didn't soften, but I also didn't twist the knife. I said, "Yes, I did. Without any help from you, and I'm proud of that. But this meeting isn't about me proving something to you. I'm not here to show off. I'm here because I decided I didn't want to spend the rest of my life with this unresolved, and because I can afford to help with the mortgage situation in a limited way, and because I want to be clear about what any future relationship between us actually looks like." My father signed the document. My mother signed it after him. I paid for everyone's coffee. On my way out, my father stopped me with a hand on my arm. He said, quietly, "I was wrong to say what I said the night you left." I stood there looking at him for a moment. He looked like a man who had practiced that sentence and was relieved to have gotten through it. "Thank you for saying that," I said. And I meant it. Not as an absolution, just as a true thing. I did transfer the money to help with their mortgage. It was a specific amount, not enormous by the standards of what I now earned, but meaningful by any measure. I did not go to their house for the holidays that year. I did invite them to the opening night of my restaurant in November, a 40-seat place in Lincoln Square that I had been working toward for 3 years, with a menu built around Midwestern ingredients and techniques I had spent a decade developing. Isabel made the opening cake. Devin cried when the first table was seated, which he will deny until he dies. My parents came. They sat at the bar and ordered the tasting menu and ate every course. My mother didn't say anything critical. My father told the person sitting next to him that his daughter owned the place. I was standing near the kitchen when Audrey appeared next to me and squeezed my arm. "How are you feeling?" she said. I looked around the room, at the full tables, at Isabel plating desserts in the kitchen, at Devin talking too loudly in the corner, at my parents, smaller and older and quieter than the people who had once stood between me and everything I wanted to become. "Like I built this," I said. She squeezed my arm again. I had, every single piece of it, and no one, not my parents' fear, not Connor's impatience, not 7 years of silence, had been able to take that from me. They had handed me a duffel bag and pointed at the door, and I had walked through it, and what I found on the other side was entirely my own. That's the thing about being pushed out before you're ready. Sometimes you find out you were more ready than anyone knew, including yourself. I've thought a lot about what actually happened in that coffee shop. Not the version where I won something, and not the version where I forgave everything and we all cried and everything became okay. The real version, which is quieter and more complicated and, honestly, more useful to me. What I keep coming back to is this. My parents made a choice when I was 18. They chose certainty over me. They chose their blueprint over my actual life. And that choice had consequences. Not as punishment, not because the universe decided to balance some cosmic ledger, but simply because actions move in directions. When you push someone out the door, they learn to walk without you. When you go silent for 7 years, silence becomes the established language between you. There's no mystery in how we ended up where we did. It was just the logical conclusion of decisions made and not made year after year. And I made choices too. Every single day I showed up when I didn't want to. Every shift I worked in Providence when the heat was off and I was eating eggs for the 3rd night in a row. Every time I chose to keep building instead of stopping to be angry, which I had every right to be. Those choices also moved in a direction. They moved toward the restaurant in Lincoln Square, toward the opening night, toward the moment my father told a stranger at the bar that his daughter owned the place. What I want to say, because I think it matters, is that none of that was luck. It was repeated small decisions made by a person who decided that being pushed out was not going to be the defining fact of her life. The defining fact was going to be what she built afterward. I think about Audrey's mom, Sandra, who let me sleep on her couch and only asked that I keep the kitchen clean. I think about Dr. Kellner, who saw something in me before I could fully see it in myself and opened doors I didn't even know to knock on. The people who show up for you, not because they're obligated to, not because you share DNA, but because they choose to. Those people are the real inheritance. Everything I have, I can trace some part of it back to someone who chose to be decent to me when they didn't have to be. That's the thing about integrity. It isn't just about how you treat people when it's easy. It's about whether you can stay honest about who you are and what you want, even when every institution around you, your family, your relationships, the people who were supposed to know you best, is telling you that you're wrong. My parents weren't evil. They were afraid, and they handled their fear badly, and it cost us both something real. I don't need to turn them into villains to understand that. What I needed, for a long time, was to understand that their fear was never actually about me. It was always about them. And once I really understood that, not just intellectually, but in my body, in the way I stopped flinching when their names came up, I had room to decide how I actually wanted to handle the situation. Not how I was supposed to handle it, not what made a good story, but what I could actually live with. I could live with helping on my terms. I could live with the document and the signed agreement and the limited relationship we have now, which is careful and a little formal and nothing like what I used to wish for when I was young. I could not have lived with either abandoning them completely or pretending none of it had happened. Both of those would have cost me something I wasn't willing to pay. That's the only real wisdom I have from any of this. Know what you can live with. Build accordingly. And don't let anyone else's fear set the ceiling on your life.